Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be talking about inflation versus dividends and the differences between them because they don't really correlate with each other, but they do in some cases. The reason why I'm making this video is because of a comment that was put on another one of my videos about BMO stock, and it kind of made me wonder, and I really had to make a video about it. Basically, what is the difference? Well, let's get down to it. So let's say, for example, we have a BMO stock, and let's say they currently pay a 5% dividend. If inflation is 7%, which it currently is, there may be some people who may say, well, why would I buy BMO stock at 5% if inflation is 7%? That just means that I'm being devalued. Well, it's not exactly how it works. Let me explain. On average, the BMO stock actually goes up roughly between 8 to 10% a year. And I don't see that being any different this year. In fact, I think it could be a bit higher. And the reason why I think that it could be a bit higher is because obviously I think that the banks are going to be doing extremely well because of this extra money printing. But I also think that at least this is my own beliefs because I've seen this with other finite items, is the fact that, of course, when you're talking about a stock, you're looking at a finite amount of stock that you can actually buy. The BMO Bank can't just go out and say, well, here's more shares. Technically, yes, they could, but that doesn't happen very often, and really not really at all with a solid company like BMO. So you've got this set number of stocks or shares on the stock market, and let's say, for example, they split their stock. Yes, there's more stock on the market, but the percentage is the exact same. There really is no difference. It's just easier for people to buy into that company. It's not like cash, where a government can say, well, we've got, let's say, $1 trillion in bills, let's just print another 10 trillion in bills, and now we've got 10 times or 11 times the amount of money than we had before. That then makes everything worth more money. Because, for example, basketball cards, let's say you had 5 Michael Jordan perfect rookie cards, there's only going to be ever those 5. So the more money that's printed means that the more higher value these 5 cards will go up because there's more money being printed and you can't print these anymore. So I actually think that because the average increase of BMO stock is somewhere between that 8 to 10% range, I actually believe that it could be anywhere between 12 and 17% this year. Now, of course, we'll just have to wait to see if that happens, but this is what you would be looking at to battle inflation, not the dividend of 5% alone. However, there is one thing that we can really look at when we look at that 5% dividend. And that is when it comes to inflation, we'll say IN for inflation. Let's say inflation's right now at 7%, which it roughly is. Then you would want the BMO dividend to increase by at least 7%. So right now, let's say they're paying $1.06, which I think they're paying around that right now anyways. And that was actually a 25% increase versus the dividend that they were paying before, which was last year. So automatically, you're already beating inflation with that 5% dividend that BMO currently pays. However, going into next year, you would want them to increase that dividend by more than 7%. So you would actually want BMO's dividend to be at least battle inflation over $1.14 per share to battle that 7% increase of inflation. So looking at the actual individual dividend itself is not really enough to say if it's going to be able to battle inflation. What you really want to do is to look at the underlying stock and see if it will increase higher than inflation and higher than interest, because interest right now, if you have it in the bank, is paying you essentially nothing. It's generally around 0.5% if you're lucky, and inflation's at 7%. Which means that right now, if you put $100 into the bank and you got that 0.5% interest, if 7% stayed for the entire year for inflation, that means that you actually only have $94 worth of buying power, or technically $93.50 worth of buying power next year with that same $100. Meanwhile, if you have it in stock and that stock increases by more than 7%, in my opinion more than 7.5%, then at that point, you would be battling inflation and winning. At the same time, if that company increases its dividend by more than what inflation is, then you're also winning. So if inflation is 7%, which it is right now, and you have stock, or at least a job, let's call it a job first. Let's break down a job first. And your hourly wage, when I used to work a regular job, they would give a 2% raise to me, which was higher than most people because my sales were much larger, and the average person got around a 0.5% increase. That's what happens when your sales are pretty much the top in the country. However, when you're looking at a 2% increase right now, which a lot of companies, especially the one I used to work for, is still giving that 2% to the top earners, and of course a 0.5% increase to those who are not the top earners, you are looking at a income that is actually decreasing buying power over time. That's why it's actually a good idea to always be shopping around for new jobs, because working the same job will always decrease your buying power every single year if they're not giving you an increase in your wages that is equal to inflation. Inflation happens every year, generally around 2%. 1 to 2% a year is the average historically over the last 10 to 12, 15 years. However, now we're in this crazy 7% time because of the amount of money that the government is printing, and they continue to want to print it. And because of that, we now should be also looking at dividend stocks the way I used to look at them, which is I want my dividend to increase by more than 2% a year, or more than inflation, which this year, if any stock I hold, other than some of the covered call ETFs that already have a higher percentage anyways than most of my stock, then other than those, if I'm holding an ETF or an individual stock that is not increasing their dividend by that inflation rate, I will be very highly likely to sell that stock and go into another company that holds, or at least increases, their dividend that is equal or greater or better than inflation. That is my own personal investment theory when it comes to dividends. It needs to increase every single year unless it's paying an exorbitant amount of dividends that is higher than anybody else. I hope that this video has really helped you. If it has, hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again next time.